Did you know that a failing timing chain can lead to serious engine damage? Let's find out how to spot the signs before it's too late. And the 3 simple steps you can take to check its condition without having to take the timing chain cover off or disassemble the engine in any way. But I'll show you that in a minute. Unless you have a real quiet exhaust and the hood open, listening, you'll never know you have a failing timing chain. What does a failing timing chain sound or act like? If it's hard starting, stumbles off the line, acts like it's got a bad accelerator pump, but it doesn't. But then once you get rolling, it runs just fine. It could be many things, but a timing chain could be the culprit. Another way of checking it, and it's not the 3 steps that I've been talking about, I'll show you them in a minute. You know, maybe you've just barely bought this old Mopar or whatever. It's been sitting in the weeds or sitting in a garage or whatever for a very long time, and you know that it's never been messed with. It still has tons of grease around the distributor, and you know the distributor hasn't been touched. And you put a timing light on it and you check the timing, and the timing's around 0. And you know when you look it up in the book that it should be 10 or 12 degrees. Pretty good chance that that chain is stretched, and stretched quite a bit. But if you look at the distributor and there's like this much grease all the way around it and there's never been a wrench put on it, that might give you a good sign that that chain could be pretty badly stretched. So how do you test the timing chain? How do you know whether it's stretched or not without tearing the engine apart or doing anything to it? Well, I'm about to show you right now. Before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little story. Back in the early 80s, I was shown this trick, and I tested it out on my own car. It had 100,000+, 318, my first Barracuda that I owned, and it just didn't run right. Once you get it running, you'd accelerate just fine, but it was a little hard to start, and it idled real slow, and you had to sit there and feather the throttle on and off to get it rolling from a stop sign. I did this test I'm about to show you, and I checked it, and I had 18 degrees of chain slop. But I didn't know whether that was too much or too little. And the very next day, actually it might have been that weekend, but I went to my buddy's house, stayed overnight, got up the next morning, went to leave, started it up, headed down the road, mashed it to the floor, and all of a sudden it went pop, bang, boom, and it never started again. When I pulled the distributor cap off and the rotor wasn't turning, it was like, okay. Pulled it apart. Of course, it was a 318. It has a stupid plastic gears on it, and the chain had gotten loose enough and beat on them. Well, they aren't plastic, they're nylon, but it's still the same thing. The chain had been loose and beaten on them long enough, it finally busted the nylon off the aluminum gear, and of course left all that shit in my oil pan, and the chain of course slipped and the timing went away, and I had 0 compression. Since the chain didn't break and it just got the timing out far enough that I had no compression, I put a new timing chain on it and put it all back together, and it ran perfectly fine. It didn't bend a single valve. If you did that on a high compression 340 or even a big block, the chain, if you let the chain break, you're gonna be doing a lot of head work. You're gonna have a bunch of valves that are bent from the piston hitting them. Hopefully it doesn't crack the piston. It could get pricey quick and fast. Even if it's running perfectly fine, you should do this test. You should just verify for yourself that your timing chain is good enough and that it doesn't need to be pulled to be replaced. Usually when you put a new camshaft in it, you just put a new chain in it anyways. But if you're not planning on doing any of that stuff, do this test and verify that your chain is still in good shape. This is my 340 that I had in my Barracuda for 20+ years. Pulled it out just because it was getting kind of tired. Still ran good. It's got a lot of miles on it. The 3 steps is: number 1, you have to locate your timing marker and turn it all the way to before top dead center. I've got it at after. And then you have to have your distributor cap off so that you can look at the rotor. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it all the way one way, which will take up all the slop in the chain. And then I'm going to turn it the other way, which will show you all the slop in the chain. And we're going to find out how many degrees of chain slop this engine has. And it's got a lot of miles on it. But it won't show you how bad it is. Well, I'll show you that in a minute. So we want to go all the way to 10 before. Now we want to go back the other direction. We want to turn it until we see the rotor, until we see this rotor start to turn. Mark. About 10 degrees. So we'll just call it 10, and we'll say this has 10 degrees of timing chain slop. Now, the reason it hasn't got a whole lot more is, number one, I spent the extra money and bought a true roller, double roller timing chain. And it's something that I do every time I put a new camshaft in. But let me show you. I wanted to put this in my 408 stroker. That's why I have one here. But the chain was too tight from the factory and I couldn't get it in. I probably can put it in there now since it's been 3 or 4 years I've been racing it. But you could buy this through Mopar Performance. I don't know if you can or not, but there's the part number. P500-7709. So what this basically is it's a Magnum. You know, you've got, this is considered an LA. Then they went to the Magnum small block. And this bolts right up there into your timing chain. And what it does is the chain comes up and rubs against here, goes around the cam sprocket, comes back down here. When you pull this pin out, this is spring loaded. So it'll hold tension against it'll take up the slack of your tensioner. So as the engine's turning, this is all pulled down straight. And this is where the chain will slap back and forth and cause your timing to bounce around and be inaccurate. When you put this in, you pull this pin out, it's spring loaded and it holds it in place. You get a lot more accurate timing. And this one has this exact same thing in there. My 408 doesn't have it because the new chain was too tight. If I ever pull the cover back off for whatever reason, this will go in. But that's why this one has as little as slop as it has. And it's a 20-year-old engine. But it still ran good when I pulled it out. It was just getting old and I didn't need to spin a bearing and huck a rod outside the block, so I pulled it. Next, I'll take it over and show you, and I don't know how many miles is on it, but this 318 that I've got over here in the corner, which I'll drag out so we can get in the light so you can see it better, but it came out of a motorhome. Most 318s had that POS fiber timing gear. With it being in a motorhome, I highly doubt it has that in it. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be a double roller timing chain, but it's going to be a single row and you know, steel gears instead of that fiber crap. Well, I say it's the fiber crap because that's how I feel, but stock engine and standard use, that fiber, it went over 100,000 miles on mine, my 318, so it makes less noise, it lasts just fine, but I'd never put one in. If I'm going to put a cam in, and I don't care what it is, including a 318 that's stock and has a 2-barrel, I'm going to put a double roll. That's just the way I am. I tend to do overkill. But anyways, like I said, it's been in the motorhome. its whole entire life has been nothing but abused, or at least working hard. It came out of my parents' motorhome. It cruised down the highway 65 miles an hour and 4,000 RPM. That's just what it did. That's amazingly enough, that 318 moved the motorhome around fairly efficient. But anyways, so it's got a lot of miles on it. I mean, it ran perfectly fine when I pulled it out. But I'll go pull the other one out and we'll do this again. I'm sure that one will have way more. So we are before top dead center 10 degrees. So that's 10 degrees to 0, another 10 degrees from 0 to 10 degrees after top dead center. Can you see that? All right, here we go again. $18 to $20 degrees of timing chain stretch. My 318 busted the fiber gear at 18. This motor, it's got a lot of miles on it, but I'd have to put a timing chain in this if I was to just put it in anything, because that timing chain is shot. Yeah, 18 to 20 degrees, that's a lot. If you've got that much, you need to invest in a new timing chain. Well, there you have it. Simple way to check your timing, or timing slop. It's so simple. You should do it just for giggles, just for fun. Another tip, something a little longer than that makes it a lot easier. And removing your spark plugs so you don't have any compression is a lot easier. I'm going to put plugs back in this, keep the moisture out of them until I decide what I'm going to build onto them next. But such a simple thing. Probably only take you, what, 10 minutes? Once you get your ratchets out and you get the cap off and get looking at it. It might be easy to have a second person to watch the rotor. But yeah, I just figured I'd share this simple little trick that I learned a long time ago. Till my next video. Bye.